Encore glass. No, I forget which dinner it was for, but I was at the table with you.
Oh, the crab feed?
Yes. Yeah.
Someone asked, he's like, you met him. I was like, I met him. I remember sitting down, but I could not place where it was. Way too much crab, way too much wine.
Yeah, so, totally.
Yeah. But yeah, that's that. Yeah, we sat at the same table.
Mm-hmm.
So how's it going out there?
Oh, it's going. We're still moving along, which is nice. The tasting room's still active. We're still getting a lot of traffic, which is great.
Good.
How about you guys?
We're doing good. Honestly, we did really well last year over year. I mean, it probably would have been a big growth year for us because we were going to roll out some more retail stuff, but it just didn't happen. So, but year over year, we weren't down. So that was good. So it was a pretty good year.
But we had the same experience. We were just slightly up, but just thanks to our club, lots of people ordering.
Well, when it first happened, we basically didn't want to lay off any of the tasting room people, so we just basically turned it into a big boiler room and put everybody on the phones and just called everybody and did a dollar ship special, and we sold tons of wine the first 3 weeks. It was crazy. Nice. So it was nice. We didn't have to lay anybody off, so that was helpful.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, we were able to keep everybody going. When the second lockdown lifted, within an hour, we had customers at the tasting room, people just dying to get out.
Yeah, right.
We had people out here today in the rain.
It's hailing now where I'm at.
Yeah, it was just hailing here at the office in downtown.
Oh, wow.
And I'm supposed to go to surf night tonight down at the drive-in. I hope it's not going to hail on us down there.
Yeah, me too. I got that. My girlfriend and I are going tonight. Got moved from last night. I was like, oh, good, it's raining. Yeah. And now it's looking like I might do it again.
Yeah, exactly. I guess I'll just decide when the time comes. All right. We are live on Zoom and we are live on Facebook. Awesome. And we've got people already logging into the Zoom side of things. So we'll see where we land over there on Facebook land. But hopefully we've got a few many people tuning in today. This beautiful little semi-stormy day in Paso. Don't know what it's doing out there, but I'm sure we'll get, yes, we have comments. Of course, Steve and Martha Hewitt over in Columbus, Ohio. They opened a Ledge 15, Dante Ducey's in, nice. And it looks like the weather is decent for you guys over there. So that's good to hear. We've got Lisa over in Nashville. And I know we've got a lot of regular watchers over here too on the Zoom side of things. So thanks for joining us, everybody. So we'll get started. Once again, I'm Chris Taranto. I'm with the Paso Robles Wine Country Alliance. You're tuning into a Paso Wine Hour. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about Zinfandel, which is, we widely say, is Paso's heritage variety. Of course, it's almost really California's heritage variety in that it was so widely planted and propagated early on in our wine history. But then, of course, Cabernet Sauvignon and so many other varieties have really largely taken over. Zinfandel at the moment represents about 6% of what's actually grown in Paso. 50%, of course. Then you've got everything else under the sun. We have about 60 different varieties. But Zin is still really near and dear to our hearts. I want to really quickly introduce and allow them to say hello. Our panel today, we've got Chuck Mulligan from Harmony Cellars. Say hello to Chuck.
Hey, everybody. Glad you could join us today. I think I'm the moldiest guy in the group today. I've been around Paso Robles since 1985. Started working at a winery that was called Australia Winery, which later sold to become Meridian. And from Meridian, it's had a couple of translations in the other names, but it's been crazy to see the growth that's happened in Paso Robles over the years. Just insane. So, anyway,
cool.
Move on.
When did you establish Harmony Cellars?
1989. So this is our 31st year.
Awesome. And so for everybody tuning in, and that if you watched last week, we talked about the Wine History Project and the book, A World-Class History. Estrella, that was part of our conversation. We had Tom Myers on, and it seems like there is a lot of people that somehow, some way got their start in Estrella and then eventually became mentors to many others. So cool. We'll get into more on Harmony Cellars and Chuck here in just a bit. Chris Rougeot from Opelo. When you say Opelo, you almost have to always say Opelo, but
you almost got to put it as an exclamation point. That's for sure. So, hi, my name is Chris Rougeot. I am the winemaker, or one of the winemakers at Opelo Cellars in Paso, Robles. I am a native of this area. I grew up in a Tascadero, which is right down the road. So I've been in this area for most of my life, and making wine for about 20 years. I've made a Zinfandel every year for 20 years. So I know it pretty well. I've worked at a couple of different Zin houses we can probably get into. And with Opelo, Opelo is definitely a Zin house. It is our #1 varietal. We make the most of it, and it's solid. For me, it's a lot of fun. So it's going to be very nice.
Cool. And you make a lot of SKUs of Zin there.
Oh yeah, that's the best part. We can go through that too. I mean, we everyone kind of knows us for, especially outside of what they'll know us for the Mountain Zinfandel, and I love Mountain Zinfandel. But we make about 4 or 5 different SKUs of Zin. So we do some different appellations. We do some vineyard designates. We do some reserves that a little bit more for aging. So and I would 99% of the time we're 100% Zin on all of these. We don't do much blending, so we have such a huge selection of Zin that we can get everything you need done just by using Zinfandel. So it's always fun.
Cool. Moving on over to Kip Lorenzetti. Kip, Chronic Cellars, right on. Thanks for coming on.
You bet. Thanks for having me. Hi everybody. My name's Kip Lorenzetti. I'm the winemaker for Chronic Cellars. I'm definitely the newcomer out of this group. I've been making wine out of fruit from Paso since 2015, been in Paso making wine since 2016. And like I said, newcomer to Chronic Cellars and carrying the torch on from what Josh and Jake Beckett, 2 Zin giants in the area, started.
Yeah, cool. And we're going to get into a lot more about Chronic, of course, and the brand as we go. It looks like you're in your tasting room. Chuck, you're over in the cellar, and Rougeot, I know you're in your office in what would be the winery over there. And so
yeah, I tried to do it outside where it was nice and pretty, but we were still we were still working, and it was so noisy. I came in here as a last resort, so I apologize for the lighting. So I had a nice spot. It was very pretty. It just wasn't. It was too loud.
Yeah, absolutely. Right on. So yeah, we are talking about Zin, and why are we talking about Zin, and why are we choosing to talk about Zin on this particular show on this particular date? Well, every 3rd weekend of March, here we call it Zin Fest. Some years I had the bright idea of changing the name because I thought, well, what if we want to do something different? So we started calling it Vintage Paso Zinfandel Weekend. That's just really too many words, and we should really change it back, I think. Anyway, we all think of it as Zin Fest. It used to be a walk around tasting type of thing, but then that got a little kind of tired, and so we decided let's revamp what Zinfest is, and we created a different type of a walk around tasting. It turned into this like evening style tasting. Now, of course, we couldn't do it last year because of COVID, and we're not going to be doing that again this year. But we're still doing a themed weekend where we're inviting people because wineries are open currently for outdoor tastings only. That doesn't really work in the hail, but some people have tents. And we're still inviting you though to come and check out Paso. If you go to pasowine.com and click on Vintage Paso Zinfandel Weekend, a lot of words, you'll see what we're up to, and you'll see what many of the wineries are doing. But let's get into Zin though first. As we talked about last week, Zin is definitely this heritage variety. So much of what Paso's history is grounded on are Italian immigrants that came to this region and began planting grapevines for their own use and for family. And it's so rooted in their culture and our culture for that matter. I grew up Italian, that it was just a part of life. And eventually, of course, it moved on into becoming this, commercially viable. But I want to start with Chuck because, so we'll get into wines in a minute, but on this particular label, you've got Grandpa Barlogio, who is highlighted on this label. And I'm curious, Chuck, you've been making wine here for a while, but you've got clearly somebody that's probably a family member and an Italian highlighted on this bottle. Talk a little bit about your history, but also what's the history here?
All right. So I graduated Fresno State with a degree in enology and got hired over at Estrella Winery back in '85. And I was just overjoyed to move to this area. I mean, there were a handful of us at the time. There were maybe 10, 12 wineries when I first started. And I just saw this huge opportunity. I liked the wines from many of the wineries. It just seemed like a great, fun place. Housing was reasonable. My first house was $90,000, 1,600 square feet, and brand new. And it was great. But as the area started growing and whatnot, I always had the bug to do my own thing. And we were fortunate enough that my wife's family, she's a Barlogio. Her great-great-grandfather is who's on the bottle, and he was one of the founders of the town of Harmony. He bought 750 acres here from the Hearst Corporation, and he had dairy cows here. And so a lot of the coastline here was settled, well, the Portuguese were fishermen, and the Italians were dairy farmers from the southern part of Switzerland, just above Italy. And so they did what they knew how to do. And they made butter and cheese here in Harmony. And he donated the property that's the little 2 acres down, we call the town. And so as we kind of got into Zinfandel, I started making Zin because of the Zin Fest too, by the way.
Oh, did you really?
Anyway, we did some history, and I was talking to my wife's mother about those days, and she told me a story where he would make wine in his basement, red wine in his basement, and he would sneak the grandkids down there and have them have a little taste with some water. And she thought it was horrible at first, and I kind of wondered how good it was every time he opened it up. No SO2, but fond memories. So I don't know, 10 years back, I said, Kim, let's change our label and kind of, do a little homage to him. I'm positive he was probably making Zin because that's what was planted. He probably went over to the Ducey's or one of the handful of other little vineyards and bought grapes and did it down in his basement. So that's kind of where we came up with that idea, and
Yeah.
It's worked out ever since. People really like that label.
Yeah. And what about Zin is it that you enjoy actually making? Is there something that you can pinpoint on that? And then also, you don't have, Zin Vineyard is not in Harmony, and we're going to get into where Harmony is and all of that in a second, but where's the fruit coming from?
Fruit comes from a couple of vineyards. They're both on the west side. One's a little tiny, was Bob Goodwin property that he had right behind Target. You can actually see the vineyard. It's just 1 acre. Planted, I get about 2.5 tons or so a year off of that vineyard. And the other one is up in Mustang Ranch, which is kind of just on your way to Nacimiento, just outside of town. You head north, and it's another small vineyard that I'm getting maybe 5 to 7 tons a year off of that vineyard. It's they're both head trained. They're not really old. and they've been irrigating them, and over the last 4 or 5 years, I've really talked them into just really cutting back, that they don't need that much water on the vines, and they're wasting money. And so they've listened to me, and so I think the quality there is coming around a little better. But there's something about, I don't know, Zin for me is just all about fruit. I don't put any new barrels on it. I don't want any influence from the barrels, so they're all neutral. And I'm just trying to capture that briar patch, jammy note that I love about Zin, and
Awesome.
that's my passion with it.
Yeah, that's cool. Hey, Rougeot, I met you back when you were with Four Vines, which was a total Zin house, and you've been making Zin now for 20 years, I think you said. And obviously,
right.
it stuck with you. Why?
Part of it it was one of the first wines I really started to make. And but one of the things about Four Vines when I was there that made it so special is that we made a big California Zin, which kind of paid the bills, but then we did what we call the Appellation series, and we made wine out of Sonoma, out of Amador, and then out of Paso Robles. And we brought them all to the same facility, processed them on the same machinery, fermented the same way, same barrel types, and it was just all about the difference of the terroir. And it's amazing, after a couple of years of working there, I mean, just you can just open a barrel up, not even get a glass out, and the smell just from coming out of the.
Did you freeze? I think you froze. Oh shoot! There he
Hello?
is. Yeah, you froze
Okay,
for just
sorry.
a second.
Okay, I should have good connection here. But so I'm not sure where I cut off, but the thing about it was that you could really tell the terroir of each one, and it really kind of excited me that it was one of my first experiences in wine back when I was younger, about how you can do all these things exactly the same, treat them exactly the same, they all become completely different things just because of where they were grown. And those are pretty disparate places, Sonoma, Amador, and here. And one's in the foothills, one's up in the North Valley, and then we have here right off the mountain coast. And the thing about it is that Zinfandel can just be just about whatever you want to be. Just like there's a lot of styles for Syrahs and other things. You can make Zinfandel. We make a reserve Zinfandel that we have a little higher acid on. We have a little bit more. We have some vineyards that have just a bit more tannin and backbone. And, those will age out or past 10 years. For Zinfandel, that's pretty good. You got to make sure you can hold on to that fruit. But we also make a sub-appellation series here now, and some singles. So we do a Willow Creek, and we do an Adelaida, which is right next door. So we have two of those, and those are, even though they're right next to each other, they're very, very different wines. Even considering the fact that some of the vineyards are within 10 miles of each other, they're still very, very different. So that's one of the things I just really loved about Zen, and as Chuck mentioned, the thing about Zinfandel, the fruit has to be there. Now I don't go neutral barrel, but I do not use that much wood, new wood, and it's usually always French, and it's usually fairly light toast. The wood to me should just basically cup that. You should just cup the fruit, and it should just complement it. But you never ever want to have a Zen that tastes like barrel. If it gets too much barrel on it, to me, I think you've kind of gone too far. You kind of lost the purity of the varietal. So it really is a very, very nice fresh varietal. So that's kind of what started me the whole thing.
Yeah.
Do you have a question?
Chuck was going to say.
I'm sorry.
I was just commenting that to me, it's the soul. It's the soul of Zinfandel, the fruit, and that's I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually started doing more. We started around 35%, and we were doing about 10% American, 10% French, 10% Hungarian. I kind of liked it, and we kind of buried it a little bit. And as the vintages went on, we just kept going down farther and farther and farther in terms of how much wood we put on there. And the thing about it too is that we do, even though I don't use a lot of new oak on it, we do use a lot of 1 year and 2 year oak. So it's very subtle. The wood will come through there, but I think it keeps it nice and clean. But now we're doing, it depends on the vineyard, because every vineyard is different. It's like children, really. But we're usually somewhere around 20% New French and about 10% American, but on a pretty medium toast, and if we can get it, we'll get some really, really tight grain. Most of the American oak I use is out of Minnesota. It's colder, the trees grow slower, the rings are smaller. You don't get quite the impact you would if you're going to get it onto say a Chardonnay or something else like that. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. That's my big thing. We have so much Zinfandel, and we are a Zin house, so we have so much Zinfandel. It's an embarrassment of riches when we blend. It's just amazing. We can do these little small lots, and it's just like, oh, like what are we gonna do? It's like, well, we could use this, but this is really, really good too. And you're sitting there going like, they're both so good, you can't decide. That's always a great place to be when you're making wine.
Yeah.
So
and you have a very sweet spot too. Where you are over there in the Willow Creek district. And so I think you're very fortunate with the piece of land that you're growing your fruit on.
Yeah, and we just planted another 20 acres. I'm not sure if you've seen the new property, but we bought the property next door, and it was walnuts. Yeah. And we farmed the walnuts for a while, but then the drought, when we had that big drought, the walnut trees did not like that. So we ended up having to rip them out, and we're putting a whole new vineyard in over there. So it's gonna be fun.
A couple of years ago, Scott took me up there and got to see it. I think shortly after you guys purchased it, and it's a very pretty property.
It's stunning.
Yeah, very true. Kip, you're the new guy. You're the new kid on the block, I suppose, taking over for and flying that flag of Chronic. Chronic for everybody, so they know, in case you don't know. Jake and Josh Beckett, the Beckett family, they were featured on Paso Wine Hour a couple shows back here. They're now with Peachy Canyon, which is where they got their start. And Peachy, of course, being a total Zin house, they brought their skills and ideas to create Chronic brand, which not only still featured Zin, but actually went into the blending of Zin. And Zin's a pretty good blender, isn't it, Kip?
Yeah, Zin's one of those. Zin's a tough one to blend with. It's so strongly flavored, and in a lot of ways, there's a lot of nuances. It's a twofold thing. It's so strongly fruit forward, but at the same time, if you're on a really good site, you want to make sure the nuances are coming through. Much like Chris was talking about, and Chucky as well. Really showcasing the site. Zin, it's natural. There's a natural bedfellow with Petit Syrah, where in much like anything we blend as winemakers, if you use things to complement, if you're doing a Bordeaux blend, you want your cab to taste more like cab, so you blend in some other things like Merlot and Malbec. With Zin, if you really want to bring some life to it and really showcase it, you work in some Petit Syrah and a little Syrah to really kind of drive forward more some of those Zinny characteristics. So here at Chronic, Zin's one of our major chunk of our program. Using it as a blender and just adding that high tone fruit. And as we touched on before, some of the sites you work with are really unique dry farm sites way deep in the Adelaida district. One of which we're one ridgeline away from having an ocean view. So we get these crazy chalky notes, these very brambly notes, very herbal notes on top of that really bright fruit. So to have that in kind of the palette in which we're working with in a blend is really, as Chris's phrase, an embarrassment of riches to have, which I'm going to start using that from now on, Chris. I appreciate that. I'm going to live that.
No problem. It's true though.
Zinfandel, let's get into the fruit itself for a little bit. It's often talked about how it is an uneven ripener, right? You're going to get clusters that are going to have green berries along with little cracked little raisins even at points in time. And so it's a funky thing to work with. Chuck, you've worked with it for a number of years. What what do you do? Do you go and do you pick it a little early? Do you go a little later? Where's your happy place when you're picking Zin and again, as this uneven ripener?
Well, you know, somebody asked me this last fall. So, you know, is it an average harvest? Is it a normal harvest? And I looked at them and I go, I've been doing this for so long and no harvest is ever like another harvest. They're all different. So it just depends. It's, you know, what does the fruit look like? Can you leave it on a little more? Personally, I like, you know, when it starts approaching 26, I'm going to take it off. I'm just not a big alcohol guy. Try to keep the alcohols, you know, 14 and a half, because I like that extra glass at night. And, you know,
Don't we all?
I don't want to limit myself. So, you know, green fruit, it's just, that's part of Zin though. Those green berries are preserving acid in the wine, while the, you know, the raisins are going to give you this nuanced character. I really want my fruit off before any strong raisiny character is going to be present. I just don't like that. It comes across to me as port-like. And so, yeah, 26 is pushing it, you know, 25 and a half, I'm happy.
Yeah. Yeah. Chris, when you were working with fruit, say from like Amador or Sonoma, the same, I mean, we're warm here. We're warm in Paso. We can get stuff ripe. We have cool nights, but the climate up there is different. What was happening? What differences existed with them?
The main difference that I saw was that we definitely didn't, you just don't, when we get these heat waves down here. So I have a vineyard, it's an old Surrett vineyard. It's right behind Mustard Creek. So it's right behind where Kip's sitting right now. So it's right off of, off of Nacimiento Road. It's beautiful. It's a 40-year-old head trained vineyard. And it's almost always the very first one we take off every year. It's always the first one we check. And as long as we don't get any heat in the late August, it's just stellar every year. The problem is that those vineyards up there, Zinfandel does not like heat right before harvest. And the problem is that you will literally go out there on a Friday and look at it and say, oh, this is beautiful. We're at 25 and a half bricks. Everything looks perfect. And then you'll get a heat spell over the weekend and it gets really hot. You come back and you can have 5 to 10% raisioning over the course of like 2 or 3 days. So people say that Pinot is a hard grape to work with. Zinfandel is a very, very hard grape to work with. You have to baby it all the time. So like you'll come back and all of a sudden you went from everything being beautiful to now it's starting to raisin and you're starting to panic and you're trying to like, well, maybe you can get the crew here a little bit earlier, start picking it off. So you just got to kind of know your science. You really, I'm glued to the weather when we're picking Zinfandel, because just a little bit of heat can make a huge difference because it's very thin skin. And when it comes ripe, it just starts to wilt if you get too much heat on it. When you're in Amador and you're in Sonoma, you don't get those heat spikes. So you got a lot more kind of leeway when you want to get in there. And I'm also with Chuck that I do not like high alcohol, high raisin. I don't like a lot of raisins in the wine. So we're trying to keep that out. And Zinfandel has a tendency to do that. I do go higher on alcohol than he does. I go to about 15.5 because you got to learn to love the bomb. Because with Zinfandel, you're going to get heat. Zinfandel, you will walk out into a Zinfandel vineyard. This is especially true in Paso, and you'll taste it. And you look at the numbers, you're like, oh, this is fantastic. We're at 25, 3.57 TAs right there. We're in great shape. And you taste it, and it tastes like Kool-Aid. And I don't want to drink Kool-Aid. Nobody wants to drink Kool-Aid. So you sit there, and you're sitting out there, and we some of these vineyards too, we're getting it from other, they're the farmers, and they're like, look at the numbers, we're ready to pick them. I'm like, but we're not picking. And we'll go out there every day, and you'll pick it, and like literally it'll be one day you walk out, and the flavors are there, everything hits you. It tastes like a raspberry, just a raspberry dream, and you're like, pick, and you have to pick right now. You have to pick. And you can't wait. The longer you wait, then it starts to go to raisin. So there's a very small window to deal with it. So yeah, some of those, one of those that gives me the most stress in terms of harvest time. but it's really amazing. I wish I'll take you out sometime and I'll let you taste it. It's like, oh, it's okay. And then you taste it again. You're like, it tastes like this is beautiful raspberry jam, and it's amazing. And that's when you pick. So, and it's funny because then the guy's looking at you like, well, now we're at 26 bricks, 26 and a half bricks. Like, yeah, we gotta stare at the train. We're gonna have the tracks eventually.
You start getting those stares from growers where they're like, "Are you?"
Yeah, yeah. I'm losing weight. What are you doing?
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
But I'm trying to make a really good wine. You're a great grower. I'm a winemaker. We gotta have to meet the middle here somewhere. So, but yeah, it's always fun when they're out there because you're trying to talk them off the ledge because you want to make good wine, right? This is a single vineyard. We're gonna make a single vineyard with your name on it. So yeah, so that's kind of what I think the difference is in those areas. And then you just have the differences in terms of the. We used to get the Zinfandel diameter up from Volcano. I don't know if you've ever been up there, but it's just this like rust red soil. Never seen anything like it. It's like a talc, and it was just it had this just really nice briary, dusty characteristic. And I just loved making wine off of those vineyards up there. And they were all old vine. I mean, we got some stuff like the grandparents and other stuff. So these vines were 120 years old when we were getting them. Wow. And then we did Zinfandel out of Chalk Hill. And I just something about Sonoma Zen. It's just it's much easier to work with than either the other two. It just kind of tends to make itself. So it's always one, you can it's like having you have two problem children. It's like, well, at least Sonoma's doing okay. And and you try to go to sleep while it's fermenting.
Everybody. Yeah, just to clarify for everybody, he's talking about his 4-vine days when he was fruit. So just making sure if you just tuned in, it's not Opolo that's sourcing from up there, but rather a past brand.
Yes.
It's so interesting how what you said, Chris, and I'm going to toss this over to Kip here, but how Zinfandel, it's so difficult to work with. And so it's almost like it's delicate and it's thin skinned, and yet it makes these really big, luscious, bold wines. It's nearly the opposite. And I want to get back into that whole blending thing with you, Kip, is that because I'm looking at this wine, we're about to get into wines, and maybe we'll even start with Kip's wine here. But it's blended with it's Zinfandel with Petit Syrah, which is a big burly guy, Tempranillo, and Alicante Boucher. How is Zinfandel lending itself into this wine? And let's just get into this wine. So we've got Dead Nuts, 2017.
So for this wine, and really this vineyard, it's a combo predominantly of DuBose Vineyard, which is head trained dry farm Adelaide Zin, and a little bit of the Dodd Vineyard, which is one ridgeline over. Same thing, dry farmed Adelaide, way deep in the hills. And with this Zin specifically, and the Petit Syrah is also from DuBose as well. So with this, the Zin is really you get those really bright fruit notes, the classic Zin aromas where they're bright red fruits, raspberries, there's some strawberry on the nose, but at the same time, there's those herbal notes. And, one of the cool styles of Zin, and I'm same as Chris and Chuck, really, I maybe not as much alcohol as Chris was saying, but I like a little more of a restrained style. So I had to pick for that, and I'm going to emphasize the keyword try, because much like Chris was saying, you'll walk out on a Friday and you'll come back on a Monday and you've already missed it. Especially with that dry farm stuff, this past year, especially when we had 3 heat spikes, it was, I kind of think we're there. And then it was, hold on, Hannah, like, when can you get a crew out here? So, in trying to get that, we're really showcasing the region of that bright fruit combined with the herbal notes and the chalky, dusty notes that you get from those West Paso sites. So the Zin is really, in this blend specifically, the Zin is really driving those bright fruit notes. There's notes of herbs and spice, and the Petit Syrah is bringing that white pepper note, those notes of anise, whereas the Tempranillo is kind of coming in underneath and adding the leather notes. So if you think of like blending specifically, and we'll get into blending with Zin in a sec, and blending, it's kind of like painting, right? So you want, I'm going to do the Bob Ross thing, and I want little cloud over here, and I want this nice blue mountain in the background. So you think of what's going to give me that happy little cloud. Well, maybe just a splash of Petite Syrah over here. I want to build this around the Zin. I want to showcase the Zinfandel from West Paso and have those bright fruit notes and those chalky herbal notes, but add that little spice with the Petite Syrah and maybe a little bit of leather would work really well. And well, I've got this Tempranillo that has this one character, that earthy, leathery note that I want in there. So toss a little bit of that in there and just, like I said, structuring around that Zin, because the Zin is you know, it's the backbone of this blend, and driving that fruit forward. And oh, sorry, I'm done. And one comment, you guys talked about oak earlier. I'm totally with you guys. Light oak. I think I'm more of a tight grain American guy. I think for me specifically, some kind of medium toast, tight grain American oak really kind of like buoys up the fruit. Like Chris said, cup the fruit. You want to just give it that little nudge forward. And to me, that light, very not necessarily showy American oak, where you get that heavy toast and it's a little too whiskey lactone. But just a little bit of a nudge to get that fruit forward. So I'm structuring the blends around, you know, predominantly American, about 10% French to add the herbs and the spice.
And so you do also make 100% Zins, right? Over there at Chronic, right?
We have Zins that are more Zin. We have blends that are more Zin heavy. We don't have 100% Zin.
So where do you decide though, then, like, is it different lots when you're deciding that you're going to be using this Zin for blending? I mean, where does the decision-making process happen in that?
Oh man, how much time do you have? I don't know if we all want to go down this rabbit hole. It's going to get weird quick. You know, and really it's, you know, for Chronic, you know, the overarching umbrella of how this program works and how I want to showcase these wines and how Josh previously did, was we want to showcase the region. We want to be able to taste the site. We mentioned terroir. I've got my own qualms with using that term just because it's said so many times and become this thing that I don't think it is anymore, but just tasting the site and tasting the vineyard. So, and we have, you take from that perspective and look at your lots, what you have. Like, well, this is a little more fruit driven. This Zin over here is a little more earth driven. So in our tasting room, we have a blend called El Perfecto, which is predominantly, it's generally 50% Zin, 50% Tempranillo. And it's a bruiser of a wine, just very big, very tannic, very showy. And the Zin in that is very restrained in that darker, herbal, more brambly style. So, you know, as lots come in and as they ferment and as, you know, trying different yeasts in the cellar and different extraction techniques, you look at those in their infancy, right? As Chris mentioned, they're like having a bunch of kids around. So you look at the kids and you're like, well, that one's got some pretty good reading skills. Like that one might be a scholar one day. So, you know, you look at that and see where, you know, in your head, you're already picking where that's going to go. Or this, you have a Zin, in the case of Dead Nuts, that's very fruit driven. But still at the same time has a lot of those subtle nuances and pointing those in that direction. Like, you know, this is really a good fit for what we want to showcase with Dead Nuts. This is really what we want to showcase for El Perfecto. We also have a predominantly Zin driven blend called Mr. Nibbles, which is a more acid driven Zin blend, more bright fruit, very lean on the oak. So more of that ageable Zin that we talked about, that Chris talked about. So it's about, you know, getting these wines and, you know, initially along a long enough timeline, you know it in the vineyard. You know, yeah, like Chris was saying, you taste it in its infancy and you're like, this tastes like Kool-Aid, which, you know, it's simple fruit. And it just, well, this is sweet, it's pleasing. But then as these grapes mature in the vineyard, you can, if you really get into the sites and get familiar, you already know right out the gate, or I mean, to a relative degree of certainty, where you're gonna put these things.
Yeah, right on. Hey, Chuck, what do you think of this wine? Did you taste it through?
It did, and one thing I noticed is that little grippy tannin from the Tannat. Is that because I make a Tannat and I get that same kind of, you know, it's much bigger on the Tannat, but that little bit of tannin.
That little grip there, that's actually the Zin and the Petite.
Oh, really?
The Zin out of that site is super structured. At the same time, it's still really fruit driven, and it's that that vineyard is, it's just a reflection of the soil type. It's just all that Adelaida cobble, where, you talk to the Adelaida farmers, they say, like, you better not deep rip that vineyard. You're going to wreck your tractor. 6 inches down, you're pulling up boulders the size of Volkswagens. It's so the Zin that comes out of that site is crazy tannic, but at the same time, very, very showy and very fruit forward. So it's a real cool spot to get Zin from.
Nice wine.
Thank you.
Chris, what do you think?
I really liked it. The first thing, when I first poured it, I got a lot of just cigar box and leather right out the bat. So if you guys do go out and get this bottle, and I do recommend it, you should go pick one up. When you first get it, you get a lot of this kind of intense aromatics, and then just give it a couple of swirls, and it kind of blows off, and that nice just the Zin, that purity of the Zin just comes right through. But as we were saying, as you want to cup that fruit, instead of, there's some barrel in there, but with that Petit Syrah and that Tempranillo, I love both those varietals. Tempranillos, I've never blended with Zin with Tempranillo, but now I might.
Highly recommend it.
It just cups the whole thing, and that's exactly what you're supposed to do. So like when I first opened it, it was a little heavy, but it only lasted 30 seconds, and then right then you had that really, really nice fruit. But you got I call it it's the English library. You have shoe polish, leather, cigar smoke, it's all those things kind of mixed in. It's like you went to, a traditional English gentleman's club when everyone's in there just reading newspapers and smoking cigars. That's what, and I love that. And it's all balanced together. It's not too much tobacco. It's not too much leather. It's really well blended. And then all of that it just really enhances the fruitiness of the Zin. As we all said, Zin, the thing about Zin is the purity of that fruit. But with the Tempranillo and the Petit Syrah, you get this extra layer, and it's a little bit bigger, and you get some of these other things that I think if you did it straight if you tried to do that, say a straight Zin with that, it might be a little awkward. But I think it works really well. I looked at the blend and I was like, Petit Syrah and Alicante, those are kind of standard Zinfandel blenders, but the 8% Tempranillo, I thought made the wine very, very interesting. I really enjoyed it.
Right on. I want to move on to our first all Zin. Get up here to talk a little bit about the 2018 Zinfandel that you made, which is the 14.7 alcohol. Spot on. I mean, this is definitely one of those Zins where you're not really sensing a lot of alcohol at all, and it is one of these a little bit more type of Zinfandels. And so, please, Chuck, talk a little bit about this wine.
Well, Chris, I hate to burst your bubble. It's not 100% Zin. It's got some petite in it.
Oh, that's okay.
And I have been known in the past actually to slip maybe 1% Muscat Canelli in if I feel like the fruit's not quite where I want it. It doesn't happen every year, but there are years where could use just a little help. And a little Muscat goes a long way. So yeah, pretty much neutral barrels that are 3 years or older. And Petit Syrah I use is, since these vines are not very old, I'm not getting a lot of structured tannins on them. And so that's where the petite comes in. And we're around 7 or 8%. I'd have to look at my notes to be sure of that. And, but yeah, when you talked about the Tannat being in the wine, I'm like, I've never done that either, but
Tempranillo.
Or Tempranillo, sorry. Tempranillo will, I'll put that arrow in my quiver next time I'm looking at blendings in.
We're all learning today.
I'm always learning.
Oh yeah. We're all thieves. We'll take anything for an edge.
Hey,
We'll leave a knife in your back though. You can keep that.
The Pablo Picasso line: "Good artists create, great artists steal."
Exactly.
It's such a pretty wine. I can tell you, Chuck. Kip, talk a little bit about this wine.
I admittedly tasted it a little bit earlier, and what struck me when I re-upped here, there's some real strong notes coming off the top of this, which to me is super, super interesting. And for the other thing that really stands out is how balanced the acidity is with the tannin structure. It's very firmly structured for something that doesn't have new oak on it. The acidity is the right point where it gives you just that little bit of lift to where it's really driving the fruit forward. It's driving those floral aromatics and hitting on all parts of the palate. So it's structured, it's got balanced acidity. And I would say this is probably going to lay down for the next 10 years easy and still stand up. This is a really, really pretty wine.
Thank you.
It really is. Chuck, what is this retail for?
Oh God, I'm out of my wheelhouse. It's somewhere between 25 and 28. You have to talk to Kim. They keep me in here where it's really cold, where people can't talk to me.
That's funny. Kip, going back to you, the dead nuts, I'll hold it up again. What does that retail for?
I believe we're, I'm gonna play my Chuck card. I believe that's 22. We're in the, 22-ish. Yeah, don't quote me on that, but yes, right around 22 a bottle.
Go to their websites. Chris, you were sipping on the Harmony, I think, for a little bit there. What
Oh yeah.
impressions?
So to me, this is a pretty this is a Paso Zin. It's pretty amazing. It's got everything that a Zin from Paso should have. It's got a lot of fruit up front. Sometimes when you're doing Zins, you get a lot of just it's kind of that straight raspberry or blackberry. I'm gonna go ahead and just say it's a really brambly Zin. It's got all that fruit characteristics, but it's just like mixed in when it's still on the vine. So you got a little bit of that. And I love that. I love Bramley Zins. And it's got all that fruit, but it's got a little bit of that pepper in there, and it's got a little bit of herbaceousness, but it's very, very, very subtle. And it's just it's doing the same thing. You have that great fruit there, and then you have all these little notes that are woven around it, and it's really, really nice. Yeah, I'm gonna have to take this bottle home. Well, I'm taking them both home. I'm sorry. I don't mean to. I don't even play favorites here.
Obvious that it's on neutral oak. Obvious that it's there's no oak.
I made Zin for a long time, and when I first opened it, I hadn't looked at it or anything, and I thought it was. I didn't get a whole lot of oak on it, so I was. But the
tannin,
yeah,
it's quite firm, and it's
yeah. And you shouldn't really. But my thing too is that you really shouldn't taste oak on Zinfandel. That's one I really don't think you should taste a lot of oak. So I just taste and go like, well, maybe just did a really good job, and I can't. And it's really, really well integrated. So because I didn't really get a whole lot. So but that was fine. The wine was delicious. I just couldn't. I was trying to gauge what the oak profile was, but I was below 15%. So I was kind of close.
Yeah. I'm finding a bit of a commonality between these three wines that I guess I didn't really kind of realize is that the sites that you guys are getting these from are all going to be in that whole calcareous kind of shale or even bordering on limestone, but not quite limestone world. Before we start talking about the Opolo wine, do you guys have any thoughts on Zinfandel, let's just say, grown in that type of soil and what it lends to it, say to maybe other types of soil, like if Zin is grown over on maybe the other side of town where it's going to be a little bit more of that clay loam kind of, big, chunky, muddy stuff. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I can start. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Chuck.
Oh, I was just going to say that there's a lot of head train vines in that area, and to me, there's just something special about head train vines. The sunlight that gets in there that's different than a vine, Zinfandel vine grown cordon style. To me, they're opposite ends of the Zinfandel spectrum, and you just don't get the intensity. It's rare to get the intensity on a cordon trained vine versus the head trained, and I think that might have a lot to do with the flavor profiles in that area too.
Chris, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I also think part of it too is that a lot of that stuff is dry farmed or there's very little water out there. And with those big, when you say calcareous soils, I don't know if maybe some guys have been out to if you went to Paso, drive up Peachy Canyon sometime. And everyone thinks those little stones, but those little stones got broken up much larger stones. And you drive up Peachy Canyon, you realize how big these are. I was in a vineyard in Adelaida, and they had a slide from one of the rains, and it came up all the way to one of the head train when he was probably 30 years old. And there was a huge boulder of limestone boulder with a vine on top of it, and the roots went down you could see the roots. They went down 15, 20 feet all the way down. You could see it from this. I've never, you always think, oh yeah, they're pretty deep roots, but these must have been 15 feet down from the surface. And I think part of that you get with all of that roots, and they're pulling out whatever water they possibly can. You pick up a lot of that terroir from that soil. Whereas on the east side, and I'm not, I think you can make Zinfandel anywhere. So I do have Zinfandel on the east side that I think is very, very good. It just doesn't have to struggle as much because it's in those alluvial soils, and you just don't have to. It doesn't have to work so hard, and I just don't think it pulls out as much character because it's just a little bit happier.
Yeah. I want to.
For me, the west, stuff on the west side, you get that chalky tannin structure is very, very evident on the on the bottom end of those zins that come out of there. Whereas on the east side, and typically in my experience, the east side stuff, the fruit is very, very bright, way more fruit driven. Whereas the west side stuff, the tannin structure is way more structured and very, very chalky.
Yeah, good stuff. Let's move on to the Opelo Zinfandel. Now, this is not Mountain Zin, and you were very specific, Chris, to feature the Reserve collections, 2018 as well. Opelo. So I take it this is kind of your upper end of the Zinfandels.
This is the upper end of the scale. This retails for $47. So we make Zinfandels from $12 all the way up to about $50. So this is on the higher end. Most people know us for the Mountain Zin, which is great. I love the Mountain Zin. I think the Mountain Zin is I make that as it's out of Paso, but it's just like a California Zin in terms of it's got lots of fruit. It's pretty zippy. It's a lot of fun. It's voluptuous, and it's pretty. You can use it for anything, and I think it's a really, really nice wine. But everyone knows that wine, so we thought we'd do we try to pick a different one. And this is the Willow Creek. So this is from the Willow Creek district in Paso Robles. Someone was from Ohio, and they said they were drinking a ledge Dante Duce. So when I first started making Zinfandel, I used to get fruit off of that vineyard, and it's an amazing sight. We used to get it off the top of the hill, and it was so good on its own. That's why you can make a single vineyard out of that. And I almost like I imprinted on it, like I was a baby duck, and that's what I thought West Side Paso should taste like. And I think the closest thing that I can get to it is making this Willow Creek Zin. Most of this, all of these are under our control. Other than I think there's 2% from one vineyard, but about 94% of this is from our estate vineyards. We got about 6%. Most of that is Willow Creek. I got 2% from an Adelaide vineyard in here too. But you go out to Opelo, and we're right there. We're halfway up vineyard, and there's Peachy Canyon. And once you crunch over Peachy Canyon, you're in Adelaide. And we're on the northernmost portion of the Willow Creek. So it's interesting because we can go a little bit down. They're pretty similar, but then as you start going down, and into the Adelaide, the other side, the Zinfandels change significantly. But it's really funny because you have this gradient, and we have vineyards all the way down from the edge of Willow Creek all the way down into the Adelaide. And it's crazy how you can just taste it, get more and more of that minerality as you get into that soil. Because we have a lot of lime where we're at, but it's not as intact as it is as you go down that ridge. So to me, I make this, and I just think it should be quintessential Paso, and just quintessential West Side lots of raspberry, lots of fruit, a little bit of pepper, not much wood. Like I said, we did about 20%. We did about 20% on this, and 20% of that 20% was French, and we had just a little tiny bit of American. And like Kip said, we were talking about that Minnesota, those Minnesota barrels, and that's exactly what they are. They're these really, really tight grain American barrels, and they don't give you. You could almost pass them off as a French barrel, but they give you they give you just enough American characteristics that it just works the whole blend. I think some of them needs just a little bit of American. But the problem is you just don't want to go over too much, because the wine just doesn't like too much oak. It just really should be showing the that purity of the Zinfandel.
Yeah. Chuck, you were tasting this wine a little bit.
Oh yeah, I really enjoyed it. I got this very deep, concentrated briar patch. Kind of reminded me of when you're hiking in Northern California and it's late summer and the birds are just in those berries by the creek, and you can the air is just laden with that really ripe, beautiful briary berry aroma, and that I get on this one. I just really, really like it. I pick up just a tiny hint of barrel, but it's done really, really nicely. It complements the wine and gives it more nuance, I think, instead of just being one-dimensional. Well done, very nice.
Yeah. This is definitely, before I move over to Kip, this is definitely, when you think Mountains Inn, and I've had Mountains Inn plenty of times, that one, it's this fun wine. It's fruity. It's an easy drinker. It's a good one. This is like a Zinfandel for cab drinkers. This thing has got a lot of layers to it, and it's deep, and there's a lot of kind of lusciousness to it that I'm just quite enjoying. Kip, what are your thoughts?
Well, first off, this is a spectacular wine. Very, very layered, very nuanced. Right out the gate, I mentioned it before, talking about a sense of place and the taste of the site and the district. The first thing right out the gate is I picked it up and it's very, very prominent in Willow Creek. As you get out there, it's dusty. Rutherford dust is a very common descriptor for Napa cabs. We have that too. And you get that very dusty note from Willow Creek wines. There's some really, really interesting blue fruit that came out that jumped out to me right out the gate. There's that dusty overtones, and then blue fruit and notes of very tobacco and spice and clove, and very, very elegantly oaked, along with this very layered and nuanced tannin structure, just all top down, just a very complete wine, and really just a spectacular wine. So hats off to you on that one, Chris. That's a nice job.
Right on.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm pretty proud of this one.
Yeah,
It should be
good stuff. Hey,
Yeah.
Before we're getting along on time here, but before we go, I wanted to also mention, even though we're talking Zin, all these brands make a lot of different wines. And I was hoping that each winemaker can kind of go through a little bit more about what, within, let's just say a minute-ish or so here, what else is it that you guys are making that you're excited about, and that might actually be your flagship? Because I know with Opelo, you guys are a Zin house, and Zin is kind of your flagship. But Chuck, over at Harmony, this is only one SKU. You don't necessarily have more Zins, and you're not a Zin house. What's happening over there? What do you make?
Well, believe it or not, Chardonnay is our biggest seller, and we do something different with our Chard. Is barrel aged 14 months, but we're doing maybe 23 to 24% brand new American barrels. So instead of that French kind of butterscotchy flavor, we're getting more vanilla in the wine, and it just continues to grow. We seem to run out of it every year, and that's kind of fun. It's weird to have, I would have never thought that Chardonnay would be one of our big wines.
Huh.
Over the years, it just keeps growing.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And then what else do you make over there though? Over at
Well, we Cabernet is our second biggest seller. Cab comes off of a vineyard out towards Hog Canyon, so it's a warmer part of the area, and it's just the to me it's right heat out there. It is very easy to get it ripe enough so that the herbally character that Cab can have is dropped to an acceptable level. Too many times I've had cabs that just that herbiness just gets to me. So I've been really happy with the fruit out there, and it's Cab is a great wine to play with.
yeah.
It handles oak really well. It handles being abusive to it while it's fermenting. And like everybody knows, like Cab in Paso, the tannins are so soft. When I read articles, winemakers in Napa and other areas, they're all trying to tame their tannins, and I'm like, what are you talking about? We don't have that here. I'm beating on the skins and leaving it on the seeds and doing everything I can to drive to extract more tannin out of the wine. That's kind of a weird experience when I talk to friends of mine that are winemakers up there, and they go, "How do you get your tannins so perfect?" And I'm like, "It's Paso."
I'm showing a quick picture of where your winery is and your tasting room over in Harmony, California. You're nestled into the kind of near to shore foothills, if you will. Only about 30 minutes outside, if that, of Paso itself, Paso proper. This is not where Vineyards, of course, are, but this, if you look to the left and those higher up green hills there, that would lead to Cambria and a lot of the Harmony shoreline. And then as you look to the right, going back over the San Luis mountain range, puts you into Paso. And so Kim had shared this image, and so I wanted to make sure I got this one up there to show where you guys are in Harmony, which is a really pretty picture or place. And I was just there actually the other morning, and it's always so pleasant to be over there in Harmony. Hey, Kip, what else? I mean, blends, you talked a little bit about some of these other Zin blends that you guys do there at Chronic, but what else is in the portfolio there?
We're primarily we have our red blends. That's kind of the backbone of our program. We've got a lot of Syrah based stuff. We do a lot of Rhone varietals, Syrah, Grenache, Mourvedre. We do some really interesting work with Tannat, which especially for 2020, I'm really excited about. Alicante Bouchette. So we have each one of our blends is kind of structured around a single varietal and running the gambit. This, we've got some Graciano in the house that we're going to work on. One of our blends is a more Tempranillo driven blend. So looking forward to working in Graciano with that. We have a white Rhone blend called Stone Fox, which is Grenache Blanc, Picpoul, and Viognier. So we primarily based on red blends out of the tasting room. And then in the broad market, we've got our Purple Paradise, which is a Zin-based blend, along with our Sweet Petite, which is a Petite Syrah and a Cab that's out on the wholesale market.
Right on. And I know that you guys, your rosés are always super popular. I know I've used them actually for PR purposes in the past. And I think you have two different rosé SKUs, don't you?
Yeah, we've got the Pink Petals, both of which are Grenache based. Pink Petals is a Grenache, a little bit of Syrah in there. And then out of our tasting room, we have a blend called Kindly Swallows, which is 100% Grenache rosé. Yeah, those
so if you haven't figured it out, and you probably should, go to the website, because they have a lot of kind of tongue-in-cheek labels that are fun, pretty, out there sometimes, kind of like Sofa King Bueno. I had to say that nice and slow, so I said it
very, very slow.
fast enough, and you're saying something different. but it's a lot of really great labels as well. Some awesome artwork. Chris Rougeot, you guys are a Zin house, but then you've got all kinds of SKUs over there, and you have a
Yeah, we have, I think we do 25 SKUs, some ungodly number. So we do a little bit of everything. We do Italians, we do Spanish, we'll do Rhones, we'll do Bordeaux's. I think the big one we're doing, we're starting to do more Rhone whites, which is fun. So some Roussanne, Viogniers, those varietals. But I think what we're really been focusing on is getting into a Bordeaux program. So we do some straight cabs, Malbec. We do some Bordeaux blends, and I've been here. For my career. I've been in Paso, and when I first started, nobody made Bordeaux's down here. Mostly because most of the things were you would sell that you had it, you made a plot, it made it easy to farm. You didn't really worry about the terroir. You just made 40 acres, made straight lines, then drove a tractor, and it all went up north. Starting in the 90s, 2000s, people started ripping all that out and actually paying attention to what side of the hill they might want to put this on. And it's amazing the Bordeaux's got a lot better when we actually started to we started to look at these vineyard sites and instead of just being quite just so commercial. So we started making cabs, and I started tasting them. They were getting really good around the area. And I still remember this. Someone asked me, like, well, we're gonna make a cab. This was not an Opelo, and so I made my first cab. And when you make Zinfandel was we talked about very delicate. You kind of baby it along during fermentation. You're very nice to it. You really just kind of cater to its needs. And that is not the case with a Cabernet. You really have to smack that thing around a little bit. My very first Cabernet I ever made tasted like a Zinfandel, and it was not good. So I still remember that. I'm like, what happened? I had a friend at a cab house. He's like, how'd you ferment it? And he's like, oh man, you did it all wrong. I was like, it was like the worst feeling. So after that, that was not recently, just so you know, it was a while ago. I remember that story. And so we started making Bordeaux, but I was like, I also kind of got a little chip in my shoulder. I was like, well, I'm gonna make a good Bordeaux. So we started making good cabs, and we have another Bordeaux blend called Rhapsody. That's kind of our high end on the Bordeaux side. It runs for about $47 too. And just being able to, when I say the Zin is almost always 100% Zin, making these Bordeaux when you can. You can decide we want to do a Cab heavy, we want to do Merlot heavy. We have Malbec, we have Pipedot, we have all the Cab Franc, and being able to make those blends is a lot of fun to me. It's just a lot more freedom as to what you can do with them because they can be anything you want them to be. You don't really have to be quintessentially like I Paso's in, which we're trying for. So that's mostly what we've been doing is we've been growing that Bordeaux program. It's been a lot of fun.
Right on. Yeah, you and James are doing a bang up job over there. I had one of the cabs. Recently, Cab Collective asked me to be a presenter on one of their programs, and Cab was featured. Robert was presenting it. Robert Nadeau, their general manager, and that thing was excellent stuff. So good things coming out of Opelo, great things coming out of Harmony and out of Chronic. You guys are all killing it right now. Thank you so much for being on today. Hey, Vintage Paso Zinfandel weekend again is the third weekend of March, so that's next weekend. Check it out. Go to pasowine.com to see what these three wineries are going to be doing during that time. Once again, we're not going to be doing one big event, but rather all of our wineries are going to be having different little structured events that they can still do within the guidelines that we're existing in, whether it be just special tastings or some sort of socially distanced type of stuff. Just go to pasowine.com, just click on Vintage Paso, and you'll be able to see what everyone is doing. Thank you, Chuck. Thank you, Kip. Thank you, Chris. We're a little over 1 hour. Cheers to you guys. Appreciate you being on today. And next week, we are going to be talking about SIP certification. I'm going to try to make sure I say her name right, Beth Vukmanik. She is the program manager for SIP certification, which is part of Vineyard team. We're going to talk about certification, what it means, break down some of the details, We got a couple of wineries that are going to join us on that, being Oso Libre and Niner Wine Estates, who are all SIP certified. I don't know if you guys, some of you guys are here as well, but we're going to be talking about that and getting down and into the nitty gritty of what it takes to become SIP certified. So check us out, pasowine.com, or here on the old Facebook as well. Thanks, everybody.
Chris.
See ya. Cheers, guys.
Cheers. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.